The Adidas Boston 12 versus the Hoka Mach X. Which one is the better daily carbon plate trainer? Let's compare and contrast, and let's find out. So before we get into the video, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're already subscribed watching this content. Thanks so much, love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Strava for all sorts of other updates and things like that. So without further ado, let's begin. Specs for both shoes respectively, somewhere here where they won't contrast with the whiteboard. And as we before we dive into this, I guess, obviously it's 2023. Both of these shoes kind of came out in the same year, and there's that big move into a carbon plate reinforced type of shoe on the market. So as somebody who's interested in that technology and sees that there is a benefit to having a more efficient, faster run on a daily basis, this is just kind of my shtick. I just try to research these things and yeah, just try to come to a conclusion of what's kind of the best thing on the market right now. So yeah, we'll start with the older of the two shoes, which in this case would be the Boston 12. This is Adidas carbon plate daily trainer, daily racer style shoe that you can race in, but is probably more recommended for daily training stuff just because there are better alternatives on the market for racing from Adidas, of course. So we'll kind of kick this one off right off the rip. This shoe does weigh in at about 9.5, 9.6 ounces in my size, which puts it at about 265 to 270 grams on average. We do have a heel of about 38 millimeters in this shoe with a forefoot of about 31, giving it a 7 millimeter offset. So it kind of teeters more on having something between the forefoot and midfoot striking as kind of your ideal sweet spot in this shoe. So that's just something worth noting if you're trying to aim for a shoe with more or less kind of a focus on your calves or more of an overall leg structure for your kind of a strike. Another thing worth noting in terms of our specs is that we do, of course, have a carbon plate in this shoe. It's more of a plastic claw, I guess you can say, which you can see 2 of the 3 prongs on it here in the center, and it just kind of follows the length of the shoe. And yeah, it's just supposed to be a flexible plate that, depending on what part of the shoe you're kind of hitting, is where you're going to get most of the flex, but that rebound is supposed to have much more of a spring in this shoe just by design. So it doesn't follow, of course, the full plate of the shoe, but you just kind of get some area of it kind of pushing depending on where you're striking in this case. The 2 foams we do have that this plate is sandwiched in between is the top layer, which is this beige foam. It's called Light Strike Pro. That's kind of your soft foam that's going to sink into the plate and give you that additional rebound, and it's just supposed to be soft for your foot to kind of sink into, so not too much pressure in that case. And then we have the Adizero foam here at the bottom, which is to have a little bit more reinforcement and kind of increase the durability of the shoe overall. And then of course we have this Continental rubber at the bottom of the shoe just to protect the rest of the foam's overall lifespan, and yeah, just kind of give you something that both protects the shoe and gives you a nice rebound effect without feeling like a giant brick. That's the most important feature of this Continental foam. And just to throw Continental tires on the shoe as a sponsor for this shoe, or just something, you know, they kind of teamed up with, and that's kind of what we got there. On the upper, we have a light mesh that is, of course, quite flexible, flattens quite nicely like a glove if you needed to do so. It doesn't have the most streamlined fit of all of the carbon plate shoes I've ever run in, comparatively speaking to the Boston 11, the predecessor to this shoe. But it does get better over time to get that streamlined fit. But immediately, with just the way the tongue has this movement and just the way the upper is kind of not as, I guess, or it's far more flimsy than some of the other uppers you'll deal with in other shoes. It's just worth taking a note that the fit of the shoe will kind of adjust itself over time as you're running with it. So that's, I think, where we're going to leave this particular shoe in terms of where I've kind of experienced in its overall lineup. And we're going to go into the newer of the two, at least for me. This is the Mach X. So I've run in the Mach 4, the Mach 5, and that's a shoe with no carbon plate, and it was a very soft shoe with a really miserable lifespan, but it's okay. It was just a star that burned very brightly before it kind of just died. Whereas now here we've got the Mach X, which has a few more additional moving parts than its predecessors, and I'm optimistic about the lifespan. But yeah, nevertheless, here we go. Mach X. This shoe does run at 9.4 ounces, is about, again, 265 to 270 grams on average in my size. We do have a heel of 39 and a forefoot of 34, which gives it a 5mm offset. So the offset seems to favor more of a midfoot strike in this shoe compared to the Boston 12, which wants you to have a little bit more of that kind of forefoot strike in area. So immediately, both shoes are kind of a high stack, as you can see, but one tends to favor more of that midfoot strike and has just basically the foam to kind of support it there. Speaking of foam, we do have two types of foam, technically three to consider on this shoe. We do have the ProFly Plus, which is the foam here on top. Again, serves a similar purpose in the Boston 12, which is to give your foot something nice to sink into, but also gives you something nice to sink into the carbon plate in the shoe, the carbon plate, as we like to call it, and give you that rebound, that spring in the shoe that you would be essentially looking for. Then we have this PIBA style foam here running at the bottom, or actually this is EVA to my understanding, which again is historically been used in some other Hoka shoes, including the Mach 5 and some of the other predecessors to the Mach X. And then we have like this PVAX style foam here at the bottom, which is supposed to also double up as the rubber reinforcement for the EVA foam. And then again, we do have the carbon plates. I believe it's the PIBA carbon plate or PVAX. One of the names, I don't remember them exactly, but despite all the naming conventions that Hoka's come up with all these items, there is a carbon plate shoe that's running, seems to be the duration of this shoe. And yeah, at this time, the spring of the carbon plate seems to be pretty nice. Again, there's a couple of things in the upper which also kind of added to some of my additional thoughts with the carbon plate at this time. Again, the upper does follow a very similar design to the Mach 5, so when we get to that point, you'll kind of see what I mean. But this is a jacquard upper. It's a fairly soft, breathable mesh upper that Hoka uses on a lot of their shoes with different color schemes and designs. It does run usually a little bit more wide than most shoes are going to buy on the market, mostly because that's just a Hoka thing. So my recommendation, I might be totally wrong on this, but like if you're like me, you're a size 8.5 and everything else, I would consider sizing down in a shoe like this. So that might be something that might resolve some of my current like debacles with this particular shoe, but at this point I would think sizing down is probably not the wrong decision if you run a certain size in Nike and like Adidas, size down in Hoka. Whatever. Okay, no point there. Other than that, I think the upper is kind of streamlined at this time. Again, it runs a little bit wider, so you'll know when you're like bumping the sides of the shoe or the toe box area while you're running. You'll know. But at this point, you know, we got the gusseted tongue. I'm happy with that. Fits like a glove. It is a comfortable shoe to run, walk in at this time. Just a few like concerns with my left foot and having some sort of sore points on the shoe, but that's neither here nor there. Now let's get into both of the shoes in terms of comparison. Which one is the better carbon plate shoe? I mean, I guess it depends, right? Again, as I like always say in these videos, the apples and oranges stuff here again is that we do have the 5mm offset in the Mach 5. We have the 7mm offset in the Boston 12. So they run a little bit of a different strategy in terms of how they want you to strike the ground. Just something worth considering. Again, you're going to have a different sensation in both shoes if you run in that kind of sense. You know, the Mach X will probably resemble more of like the Rocket X or the Rocket X2 as a training successor, I guess you can say, for that particular shoe. Whereas like the Boston 12, I think the Adizero Pro is the race day shoe for this type of shoe. There might be like the Adizero Pro 2 or 3 at this point, not 100% sure. But this shoe is supposed to be that training buddy for that particular race day shoe. What else? The uppers on both shoes, I would say the upper on the Mach X is a lot more streamlined than the Boston 12. That being said, I also think it's a little bit more comfortable than the Boston 12. Less moving parts, I think, on this upper than in this one, whereas like the tongue does seem to move around a lot in this particular shoe. This one tends to be stable, but has this tongue right here, tends to be a little bit stable, but I don't like that the Mach shoe historically does get a lot of scrunching in this particular area, which may end up pulling and tightening the shoe and end up kind of like creating, you know, kind of, I guess, like an arch on this particular style shoe. So that's just something I'm going to watch out for as I start putting in more miles on the Mach X. That issue, you can kind of see that on the Boston 12 at this time. There's like a little bit of that scrunching, but with the carbon plate as being a factor of the shoe, it's keeping the upper kind of where I need it to. It doesn't exactly tilt the shoe upward, and it's not really changing the overall fit of the shoe at this time. But again, just something to consider. As you like, when you tie your shoe and you're pulling the tongue, or you're pulling the tongue before you tie, just to have this like secured around your ankle, just be aware of what's going on in this area. It does create kind of those pressure points. In terms of Light Strike Pro versus Pro Fly Plus, I do like both foams at this time equally. They're not like totally mind-boggling or anything I've noticed as tremendously different at this time, but they are both, again, squishy, comfortable, and I just like them both, as I lose the one shoe there, but it's alright. We got the other one here. I would say they feel about the same in terms of like squishing them. The carbon plates, can't really cut them in half at this time because I'm still using the shoes, but we can always try to pull them out later and just be like, hey, this is the carbon plate and this is the plate in this shoe. In terms of the EVA and the Light Strike 2.0 foam, they do have also a same kind of feel. So the principle is the same in all the shoes, right? Or most of these carbon plate shoes is like you have the soft foam on the top for your foot to strike into, the carbon plate, and then you have the tougher foams on the bottom, and then some kind of rubber foam outsole to kind of protect the shoe at this point. So I would say in the market, these shoes are probably head-to-head for each brand in terms of which one you would go with. I would say it comes down to brand loyalty as to which one you would like more. Just in terms of right now, like at this day and age of which shoe I've used more, I've definitely used the Boston 12 longer than I have used the Mach X. I am optimistic about the Mach X, even though my reviews of this shoe online, or what I've read, is that the shoe is kind of mixed in itself, whereas like the entire running internet, from what I see, seems to agree that the Boston 12 is like the greatest running shoe this year. So, you know, you just kind of have to read up a little bit on your thoughts there. I do kind of agree with the internet to some point. Like the Boston 12 is quite a good shoe. It's not as good as the Boston 11, but in terms of being like the shoe of the year, it's probably up there in my top 5, top 3 for sure. The Mach X, again, I'm very optimistic about everything that's going on with this shoe. I've always liked the Mach family in Hoka's lineup, so it's just a case of, with the additional moving parts that Hoka has put on this shoe in addition to the carbon plate, will this shoe continue the Mach family tradition of creating a really fun daily trainer slash speed racer or speed trainer during your week? So at this point, I would say my opinion on these two shoes is that it's kind of a draw, and it is kind of a brand loyalty thing. And if you want to believe the internet, then the Boston 12 is the greatest shoe on earth. If you want to believe me and have hope in my optimism that the Mach X might be like the next best thing depending on some additional testing, that's the direction I would go, but I would not write this one out. Yeah, that's kind of where I sit with this. They're both respectively doing a good job in their respective brands. Very identical in terms of what they're supposed to do in their respective lineups. And I've been kind of happy with both as of right now at this time. So I think we'll leave the video here. If you agree or disagree with the assessment, let me know in the comments below. But I think I will leave this video here. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys in the next one.